Okay, so today's notes are going to be from 2.2 ecosystem services. And ecosystem services are goods that come from natural resources or services or functions that ecosystems just naturally carry out that actually have measurable economic and financial value to us. So, all of these services are going to be very much like human centered, looking at how we benefit from things in the environment. So, there's four types of ecosystem services. The first are called provisioning services. These are when goods are taken directly from the ecosystem or they're made from natural resources. So, think about things like wood, paper, and food. Regulating services are um, natural ecosystem activities that regulate the climate and air quality. They help to reduce storm damage, and they actually lower humans' healthcare costs. Supporting ecosystem services are when natural ecosystems actually support the processes that all of the other ecosystem services require to basically support life on the planet. So when I think of these, I generally think of anything involving the biogeochemical cycles, not just the ones we learned about, but any nutrient cycling that occurs within the ecosystem. And then lastly, we have cultural ecosystem services, which is when humans can we can generate money by recreation, whether that's people going to parks, camping in nature, or taking tours of natural places, or it's when we can generate money from scientific knowledge. So in various ways, whether that be to create or develop new medications based on natural products. Okay, so humans actually disrupt ecosystem services. And so this occurs when anthropogenic activities disrupt the ability of ecosystems to function. This decreases the entire value of the ecosystem services that they provide. One new term that's going to be really important, and I'm highlighting it here, is the term anthropogenic. And I just realized there's a typo there. I'll go back and fix that. But anthropogenic is something that is human caused or man made, or I even sometimes will say that it's related to humans. So, an anthropogenic activity is some sort of man made or human caused activity. These activities, whether it be deforestation, wetland destruction, burning fossil fuels in cars. These all have ecological or natural impacts, and they also have economic or financial money based impacts or consequences. Some examples would be clearing land for agriculture, or cities removing trees to build, say, homes or apartments. And these things all, clearing land and then removing these trees, those actually store carbon dioxide. So, because those are cut down, then there's more CO2 in the atmosphere. The trees aren't taking as much. There's more climate change. And then ultimately, because when there's more climate change, there's more storm damage and our crops begin to fail. And these are all things we're seeing with climate change. Anyway, so this is the major way that humans disrupt ecosystem services. It's one example. Another example of how these anthropogenic activities disrupt the services is when we overfish. There's been a real problem in our oceans with overfishing. And if you have lived in Florida or go to Florida often or know people that live in Florida, they'll talk about, there being a limit on when you can fish certain types of fish or how much fish you can actually pull from the ocean. So overfishing basically leads to these fish population collapses where not only are people losing their jobs, but we're having lower fish sales and destroying entire ecosystems. Okay, so let's talk in a little bit more detail about each of the different ecosystem services. So the first is provisioning services. These are goods or products that are directly provided to humans for sale or use by ecosystems. So some examples of each of these things. Fish. Fish are one thing that we use for food primarily. We also hunt animals for not just the food, but for the skins. Lumber we use for wood, or whether it be for our homes or our buildings or to build furniture or to make paper from the wood pulp. And then also naturally grown foods like berries, seeds, wild grains, honey from bees. These are all provisioning services. Provisioning services are also goods and products that are made from natural resources that ecosystems provide. So I guess when I said paper before, that wasn't actually directly provided to us. We actually take that product and then turn it into something else. We also take different herbs and saps from trees and things to make medicine. And then we also use different types of plants to produce rubber. And then these provisioning services many times are disrupted because we like to over harvest them. We're making money from them, so let's keep taking, taking, taking. But what that does is disrupts those provisioning services. So we're really talking a lot nowadays about sustainability and how do we sustain the population of these plants and things that we're using while still having it be economically beneficial to us. Water pollution is another provisioning service that we disrupt when we pollute the water. Clearing land for agriculture and urbanization, that's another way that we can disrupt these provisioning services. Okay, so the second type of economic or ecosystem service is regulating services. These are benefits provided by ecosystem processes that help to moderate natural conditions like climate and air quality. So think about trees. When we have a lot of trees in an area, they will actually sequester. Sequester is a term that you really should know. Sequester means to store, and we usually talk about it when we talk about carbon dioxide. So trees in a forest will sequester or store carbon dioxide. When they go through photosynthesis, they pull in that carbon dioxide through their leaves. This reduces the rate of climate change. That's a benefit for us. And it lessens the damage caused by rising sea level and reduces crop failure from drought. So all of these things are services that are provided just because trees sequester CO2 from the atmosphere. Okay. All right. Trees also filter the air by absorbing air pollution. So that's another great reason to have trees around, because then what that does for us is it reduces the healthcare costs for treating different diseases like asthma, bronchitis, pneumonia, things that are caused by air pollution. All right, and so this regulating service can be disrupted by humans deforesting land. All right, supporting services. So supporting services, I think, are probably the most essential for life on the planet. These are natural ecosystems are necessary. These services are necessary to support all other ecosystem functions. And it's any type of service that involves the biogeochemical cycles. So let me give you a couple of examples of that. So I want just to remind you, the biogeochemical cycles are the carbon cycle, the nitrogen cycle, phosphorus cycle, hydrologic cycle, or the water cycle. There's also others, sulfur cycle, lots of different things, but those are the four main ones that we have to know for apes. So the first example of a supporting service is when photosynthesis allows plants to grow, and it provides oxygen and energy in the form of glucose for all other living things on the planet. So that's a very important supporting service. It's kind of like the foundation of life on the planet. If we didn't have photosynthesis, we wouldn't be able to survive here. And then another would be, one example would be nitrogen fixing bacteria. They actually take that nitrogen out of the atmosphere and they transform it so that plants can then absorb it. And there's a typo there, but they can absorb it through their roots. So that's a very important ecosystem service, supporting ecosystem service. So how can these be disrupted? These can be disrupted by pollinator habitat loss, because pollinators keep plants living. And so we're starting to find that we have a real problem with bees in the United States because we're losing so much habitat. And then also because we're building so rapidly, we're filling in wetlands to develop whether either commercial properties like stores and restaurants and things like that, or we're developing neighborhoods. So those are two ways that we disrupt these supporting ecosystem services. Okay, and then the last type of ecosystem services are cultural services. This is when we generate revenue or income from different recreational activities that occur within our ecosystems. So things that I think of right away are hunting and fishing licenses. The state sells a license that you have to buy if you're going to go fishing or hunting. When we charge park fees, like I live fairly close to Fort Bend, um, state park, and I have to pay a fee, or I have to buy an annual pass so that I can get into the park. And then any sort of tourism related spending. So if you've ever been to a national park, there's a lot of money that you can spend to do various things within the park itself, whether that's going whitewater rafting or having a tour, maybe renting a Jeep and driving through the area. So if you've ever done anything like that, that's considered a cultural service. And cultural services are not just this revenue, but they're also profits from scientific discoveries that are made within ecosystems, whether that involves human health, like creating new medications based on a tree sap that we find in the Amazon rainforest, or it's an agricultural discovery, or it's just general educational knowledge. There's profits that go along with learning this information in the scientific field. So, examples: beautiful landscapes draw tourists who pay to enter parks, and they spend money at local stores, at restaurants, paying to camp there, whatever the case might be. Maybe hiring a guide to take them on a trail, right? All of these are examples of cultural services. And then, like we already sort of mentioned, the fishermen pay for fishing licenses so that they can catch fish. And then scientists learn about plant compounds that can lead to the creation of new medicines, which are then sold for profit. Okay. So, how are cultural services disrupted? They're disrupted by deforestation, by air pollution, water pollution, land pollution in general, and through urbanization, which is the spread of urban areas where we tear down local natural wetlands and other natural land. Okay, so that's it for today's notes. Here's your practice FRQ for 2.2. You should be able to describe an ecosystem service that intact forest ecosystems provide for humans, and identify one human activity that could degrade this ecosystem service, and explain how the activity decreases the value of the ecosystem service. All of these FRQs can be found in one document that I have under each unit on OneNote. So you can check your work there as a reminder. Okay, I'll see you next time. If you have any questions, make sure you ask me in class.